right, it is 5 o'clock, July 13th. I call this meeting of the Clear Creek Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been duly called and that its notice has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. And with that, community input. Don't believe we have any. And next item is our consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Cheka. Motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand. And no opposed. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the health insurance premium contributions conversation.
And on May 1st, 2026, TRS released health insurance premium rates for the 26-27 fiscal year. And Ms. Benzai will explain the coverage costs and make a recommendation regarding CCISD contribution levels.
Okay, good evening. So, as Dr. Engel said, our health insurance rates were released on May 1st. The Region 4 premiums increased by approximately 12.1%, which exceeded the statewide average. And the increase is primarily driven by the rising healthcare cost in the Houston area, particularly increased utilization of high-cost freestanding emergency rooms. So as far as plan changes go, the overall plan benefits remain largely unchanged. Here in Region 4, TRS is implementing a two-tier hospital network for inpatient and outpatient services. So if employees get medical care at a Tier 1 facility, they would have, for instance, a 30% co-insurance charge, which is no change. But if they seek health care at a Tier 2 facility, that would be a 40% co-insurance change. So what they're doing right now, Houston Methodist is the only hospital system designated as a Tier 2 provider. And it's really to encourage individuals to use lower cost facilities and help control future healthcare cost. Interesting to note is that 85% of Texas school districts participate right now in TRS Active Care. The program had a record year for new participation. There were 25 employers joining TRS Active Care for 26-27, and there were actually 14 districts that returned early under new House Bill 3126, which demonstrates continued confidence in the program despite the higher required premiums. So our health insurance contributions costs are shared by the district, the state, and the employees. The state contributes $75 per month. School districts are required to contribute $150 per month. Our contributions are well above that required minimum and remain competitive. We looked at other school districts, so we do remain competitive with our surrounding districts. At this time, we are not recommending any changes to our employer contribution structure for 26-27. The district would maintain the same employer contribution levels across all plans and coverage tiers as the same as that we have for the current year. Due to the higher TRS premium rates, employees are expected to pay approximately $15.5 million in premiums during next year, which is an increase of approximately $3 million over the prior year. And our annual employer contribution for CCISD is at $12.9 million per year. And that's out of our general fund budget. So although healthcare costs continue to rise, our recommendation is to maintain that the district's current contribution strategy to allow us to continue offering competitive healthcare benefits. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Benzai. All right, I'll open it up. Any feedback? Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Benzai. The rate increases for next year. I know there was a chart that was provided to us, and it looks like possibly a family could see an increase of, it looks like $241 per month additional, I think is the highest. Is that right?
That is the highest. We have about 21 families or employees that are enrolled under that particular plan that would see that increase. Over the years, the premiums for spouse and family coverage have driven up, and spouses are always the most expensive to cover. Children are not. But those rates have really gone up, and what's happened is our utilization, or folks that are enrolled in spouse and family coverage, have dropped as they go to they utilize their spouse's plan. They may just carry their children. So not as many folks insured under family coverage. Most of our folks are insured employee-only coverage.
And so based on the percentages and the numbers enrolled in the plans that are offered, do you have a sense of possibly the average increase total per year that an employee would see an increase in their premiums overall?
About $720
$720.
per year, assuming they have employee-only coverage, and that's based on the $62 per month.
Okay.
Sometimes we also see during open enrollment, employees will look at the plans and they start migrating to a different plan that may have a lower premium when we have a premium increase. So we will see some movement. For example, they may move from Active Care Primary Plus down to Active Care Primary, and just to, based on the overall premiums.
Okay. I know this is something that we've looked at each year and considered whether there's something that we try to do to offset the increases, and just thinking about that as a total cost or impact to compensation annually. Just think it's important for us to keep that in mind as we have that discussion going forward.
Right.
So-
We consider that every year because we have about 80% of our employees, well, maybe 3,000 out of 5,000 employees have health insurance through Clear Creek ISD, and so it's always a conversation when we look at putting money in compensation or in benefits, and I think it's important to look at it every year, and this year's just as you'll see when we go through compensation, it's a challenging year, and so at this time we're just recommending keeping our contributions flat based on that.
Okay. Thank you.
So last year, if I remember correctly, our region had one of the lowest increases.
I believe they did.
So in 1 year, the region has used that much more. Okay.
Historically, the Dallas area, I believe, has been the highest cost for medical care. But yes, this is what we've been told by Active Care, is that the region for the Houston area had a large, just when they look at claims cost and analyze those, the Houston area did have a high claims cost this year. And previously, several years ago, the rates were the same across Texas, and so it's relatively new in the past 2 or 3 years where they've modified the rate structure, because if you look at the Valley, the healthcare costs are very low, yet they were paying the same premium costs as a Dallas, where they have higher claim costs. So TRS went in and did regional ratings and premium structure. So that it's relatively new to on how they're pricing the premiums.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move we approve the 2026-27 CCISD health insurance premium contributions.
All right. Thank you, Trustee McKay. All right. Motion on the floor. Any other discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. And no opposed. Motion passes 7-0. All right. The next step is some repairs.
And shortly before the end of the school year, Clear Creek High School experienced a failure of one of its 7 primary electrical feeders serving a significant portion of the campus. Subsequent testing determined that the remaining 6 feeders were also at increased risk of failure. So Mr. Miller will provide additional information and the district's response. And I know he's been keeping you abreast of that in the Friday packets.
Thank you, Dr. Engel. So we did have a failure of one of the big feeders, and these are some pretty sizable feeders over there. And Dr. Engel declared an emergency on June 1st, which authorizes us to proceed with repair and scheduling and doing all that work, which we have subsequently begun that work. That declaration is in accordance with board policy CH legal and local. And so as that work is ongoing, we provided information and details in your packet to show what the total cost is. So we are recommending that the Board of Trustees ratify a purchase contract to C&D Electric in the amount of $1,539,545 for those electrical repairs at Clear Creek High School. C&D is one of our board-approved electrical contractors and has done great work for us in the past, so we utilized them to complete this work. And also in accordance with board policy, we will report monthly on our expenditures and encumbrances until the repairs are complete.
All right, thank you, Mr.
I
Miller.
probably missed it. What was the time frame for this work? Or what is the time frame to get this the completion?
Before school starts was the intent is first week of August is what our target is. We have been out there doing the bores for the last week or so, I think, little more than a week. So we'll get the bores complete, get all the wiring ready to pull, and then we're going to try to minimize the shutdown for the school to within 1 to 2 days by running all the wiring ahead of time and then connecting it all in one day to minimize the downtime.
Thank you.
But it has to be back up and running for start of school.
There you go. Everybody will be cool.
Thank you, Ms. Lilly. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
Mr. Miller, is this, could you just talk a little bit about what causes something like this to happen? Is it age? Is it just failure of equipment? Is it, do we have any insight? Is it something that occurred that triggered it?
We do. So whenever you pull big feeders like these feeders, you can damage the insulation on the feeders. And as you damage that insulation, it will degrade over time because of the amount of heat running through those wires. And once it does, it will short out and burn up the entire set within that electrical conduit. Beginning in about 2013, we started testing all of our feeders over a certain wire size because of this very issue. Is that it is a known issue if you don't test those feeders and verify that it doesn't meet the requirement ahead of time. By the time it fails, that contractor will either already be out of business or it's been so many years that you don't have any recourse. So since 2013, we've been testing those, and I think West Ag was one where we had the contractor pull all the wiring out and reinstall new wire because it failed the test before we even started the school back up. So we know it's an issue that we've had to deal with in the past.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Sanchez. And I just want to make sure for the record it's all clear, the source of funding.
Bonds 2023,
Right.
savings and interest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. No other questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to approve the recommendation of the superintendent for the board to ratify a purchase contract to C&D Electric in the amount of $1,539,545 for emergency electrical repairs at Clear Creek High School.
Thank you, Trustee Cheka. All right. Any other discussion? All right. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right. And no opposed. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right. Next up is a strategic budget team report.
Yes, so thank you, President Cottrell. This is for information and discussion, and you have some of this information in front of you. But as background, in June 2026, The district enlisted input and guidance from an external group of parents, business leaders, former CCISD trustees, along with 3 current trustees. The group met for a full day and a follow-up teams meeting. The strategic budget team received extensive information from district leaders on various topics and were asked to provide a set of recommendations for the superintendent. The strategic budget team will continue to serve as an advisory committee throughout the Beyond Boundaries initiative. Clear Creek ISD has historically relied on community expertise, and the strategic budget team is another example of the importance of our community district partnerships. This evening, we will begin with an abbreviated presentation of the full day of information district leadership provided to the strategic budget team, and then pause for any questions, any input. There's quite a bit of information, and then we'll follow that with the specific strategic budget team's report, which you have a copy of. So we'll begin that presentation on the screen. And I'll start off, and then I will be handing this off, but as we always do with everything, we start with our mission, vision, empowering every student with a world-class education that ignites passions and fuels endeavors. And we walked through that with our team, and just to give the team a little bit of grounding. Let's see, do I have that? Okay, yeah, so just, make sure that everyone on that budget sprint team was aware of who we are, and a little bit of information about our district. Demographics, same thing, just the at-risk, economically disadvantaged, all of those data pieces that you do have. Then we started looking at our goals, our academic achievement, which of course we have 3, and just increasing our daily attendance by 2%, increased our overall accountability from 83 to 88. High schools improving, and now we are, that was previous data. We have confirmed, at least for the high schools, that we are all A's for next year. So that's a confirmation. We don't have all the other information, but we do have that as a confirmation. Also reiterated our low tax rate, lowest tax rate in more than 30 years. And those are familiar things that we will go into more detail with when we talk about the budget. But this was really the focus, was for this district goal 3 to cultivate innovation through strategic collaboration and responsive organizational stewardship. And this specific strategy is to develop the Beyond Boundaries plan for student enrollment growth, facilities optimization, and financial stability. And we know, and we'll look at all the growth measures and those things that are that have changed over time. The purpose of the strategic budget team was to really address some of these issues, the financially sustainable recommendations, to look at different things that our district is facing, including declining enrollment due to multiple factors, inflation on operating cost, and competitive pressure on compensation and benefits, and we just talked about some of the benefit pieces of it. So our strategic budget team charge, and we specifically asked them to identify areas to reduce expenditures, to maximize the use of existing district facilities and consider alternative uses or consolidation of underutilized spaces and buildings, analyze student enrollment trends and projections of special populations and prioritize resources to support these trends, evaluate the need to increase revenues through property tax rate that may require board or voter approval, prioritize protect resources in the support of increased student achievement and Vision 2030, utilize data when analyzing benefit versus risk of recommendation, and refraining from using the district's reserve funds to balance the budget. Really, and this was just an advisory group, and I say just. We are incredibly grateful for the amount of time and effort that this group put in, and they took in a lot of information and created you prioritized some recommendations. Then those were shared with me, and we're going to share those with you this evening. And these are recommendations for consideration. And they kind of fall into three buckets: revenue enhancement, facility operations and efficiencies, and school and staffing optimization. And I'd like to take a minute, we did this with the committee, to try to make sure we're grounded on where we've been. And I think we're all familiar with going back to 2023. In 2022, we were concerned about a $31 million deficit looming in front of us for multiple factors. Created a budget sprint team. And out of that budget sprint team, we got some recommendations. And I'm going to share, these are some highlights from that budget sprint team. They recommended for revenue increases, a voter-approved tax rate election for $18 million, increasing student attendance by 2%, creating an open enrollment program, increasing corporate sponsorships and advertisements, expanding tuition-based pre-kindergarten program, and creating an online academy. All of those were recommendations right out of that budget strategic team, the sprint team. Overall revenue increases since that time, $23 million. On the other side, and we are very grateful, our community rallied behind this and supported the Vader and a bond that allowed us these priority repairs and replacements, that we continue to use those funds and the savings for that continuously to keep our facilities as they should be. So expenditure reductions that were also recommended during that committee, or in that committee report: right-sizing classes aligned with enrollment, restructuring district and campus non-teaching supports, reducing overtime, reducing non-campus budgets by 5%, increasing facility rental fees, and reducing energy costs. All of those have been done over the past few years, resulting in a $20 million expenditure reduction. So where we are today, just a few pieces. We know the enrollment projections we've continued to talk about, but those are things that not only us, but across the state, we have declining enrollment. Some public schools, we have noted, have seen even some closures, some consolidations. There are just some things across our state that we're continuing to monitor and watch and get information on. Our budget challenges: enrollment and average daily attendance, inflation, staffing and compensation, and state funding uncertainties, all kind of come together, and it's not just for our district. This is statewide. We did share this graph with the committee. We do have a PASA enrollment update that we will present in July at the board meeting. So PASA will be here to present. It's probably a little bit more of a decline, not much. I mean, we're pretty well on target, but they will share specifics. But this is an historic picture of that decline, and really going back to a kind of, we had been a fast growth district, and somewhere around 2019, that started to change. And so thinking of ourselves, and you could see that fast growth trajectory, and then it kind of levels off. And then obviously COVID hit every one of our districts, but then it continues to kind of level and then continues to decline. And these are numbers from the pink, from our previous demographer, and we'll have some updated numbers at the July board meeting. Enrollment initiatives that we have undertaken: open enrollment that the board has approved, expanded tuition pre-K, we expanded that 2 years ago, and virtual learning expansion that will be implemented. It is being implemented, and we're ready to roll that out this fall. So school and staffing utilization, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Houston. That just kind of some summary information that we shared with the committee, and this is some more additional information, and several of us will kind of provide some data and some pieces on that.
Right. Thank you. So this was a very important area in discussing enrollment declines and those trends there, to also look at how they impact schools and staffing. And so we all know that smaller schools are great for us, and that's great for dedicated staff and having a strong commitment to our communities. There's also a strain that can happen as well over time when we look at programs and having all the same programs and meeting all the needs of our students under the same kinds of needs, and as well as having these financial constraints on our campuses. Next slide. And so thinking about our schools, it's very important to realize how we do things currently. We right size every year based off the needs. And so when we are growing in enrollment, it's a great thing there. So we're adding teachers each year, we're looking at numbers. But when you are declining in numbers, you also have to take away teachers. And so this can be a great practice, but can be very daunting when it comes down to having declines over years, and has challenges on offering the same programs on all the campuses. We have to decline when enrollment's declining and teachers must be removed on campuses. And so why does this matter? Very important to think about how we look at not just performance academically, but also school culture and sustain the programs and needs of all the campuses. We also have our PLCs. Professional learning communities are very important to our work on campuses, and having fewer teachers means less time to collaborate and plan together. You also have to understand how that impacts the needs of the kids on the campuses. And so when you have less numbers on a campus, that also means you have a higher concentration of needs of students on those campuses. And so when we're looking at our resources, that produces a larger strain on resources, campus by campus. And then, of course, volunteers are the backbone and real strength of our campuses and our community. And with less families, that means less opportunities for volunteers for those campuses who have fewer students. And so looking at our campuses currently, for elementary schools, we know that we see that school size does impact things when it comes down to teachers and the units on each grade level for teachers. And so we want to see that on our elementary campuses that we have at least 4 teachers per grade level. We'll love for our campuses to be 550 to 800 students per school. These are very important things for elementary schools. Looking at intermediates and high schools, a little bit different there. Of course, we know intermediate schools have a large capacity, and so right now our current 10 campuses in intermediate schools range from 661 to 1159, and we want to see 900 on average on every campus, and right now 5 campuses have less than 100 students on those intermediate campuses. As far as our high schools, they're all in great shape. I believe our smallest is around 2,200 to about 26 plus on those campuses there for our 5 comprehensive high schools. But we also do have our 2 schools of choice, Clearview High School and Clear Horizons. And so those numbers on those campuses are much less based on those needs there. And we know that Clearview is around about 190, whereas Clear Horizons is about 400 students on those campus, on that campus. Next off will be Mr. Miller.
Thank you. We're going to shift over to another one. So as part of this process, we reviewed and discussed, as he mentioned, enrollment trends, facility utilization, and operational costs per students. At the comprehensive high school level, we have space for 12,500 students. As of 25-26, we were at 12,134 with 366 seats available. Looking at the projection for 29-30, we're projecting to have 11,456 high school students enrolled with 1,044 available seats. Moving to the intermediate level, we have space for 10,530 seats. In 25-26, we had 8,880 students enrolled and excuse me, 1,650 available seats, which amounts to about 84%. We are projecting in 29-30 to have 8,330 students with 2,200 available seats, which amounts to a 79% utilization. At the elementary level, in 25-26, we had 16,998 students with 5,096 seats available, about 77%. And we are projecting in 29-30 to have 15,376 students enrolled with 6,718 available seats. So that's at 70% utilization percentage. We also reviewed operational costs in central administration facilities. For our other school facilities, we mentioned as schools of choice. I wanted to kind of go through some of this. So at Clear Horizons, we have a capacity of 400 students, which is at San Jacinto College. Annual operational cost for for that campus is $2,125 per student. Clear Path Alternative has a functional capacity of 170 students. We generally get up to around 130, but we have had as high as 170 in the past. The operational cost per student for that campus is $7,019 per student. At Clearview High School, functional capacity is 706 when you use the 25-to-1 capacity calculation. That program is based on a 12-to-1, which is part of the purpose of the program. That enrollment is at 191, and operational cost per student for that campus is $10,932. So we discussed that during the committee and compared that to the average high school for comprehensive high school, which generally runs about $2,505 per student to run annually. And then we discussed as well central administration facilities. So I wanted to provide a little background on that. So this building here, the Education Support Center, is about 40,000 square feet, a host of different departments that are run out of here. So it's about 120 staff members. We also have the Learner Support Center, which, as you know, is the old 9th grade center next to Clear Lake High School. It has 161,693 square feet and has 126 staff members, but it also has some large programs like robotics and that use a lot of space. The Technology Learning Center is 34,411 square feet, primarily technology run out of that building with 56 staff members. We also added Bay Professional Learning Center, which is about 6,500 square feet. It's over behind Bay Elementary. It doesn't have any staff members. We schedule it for professional learning. We are planning to demo that building over this fall or spring to open that space back up for the campus and save the insurance and utilities and all of those things. And I believe that's it for me.
Okay, so we spent time with the budget team looking at giving them an overview of finances, and we did ensure that to let them know that we are committed to being good stewards of public resources, taxpayer dollars, and that's in CCISD reflected by maintaining strong financial reserves, clean audits, ensuring fiscal accountability. We have a strong first rating of an A through TEA, providing transparent communication and utilizing sound financial planning. We also wanted to spend time with the team to explain why Texas school districts are having funding issues, and really organized it into 4 different areas here at CCISD. We spoke to them about attendance and enrollment, which you've heard about. You've seen the loss. Our funding is driven by our enrollment and attendance, and so that has hit CCISD hard with the loss in revenue from post-COVID by about 2%, and also that enrollment loss, which over the years is about a $28 million annual funding just by not having those students here. So we've been very proactive in our response. Our attendance initiatives were almost back up to pre-COVID amounts. I believe we're very or at 95%. We've also taken steps to grow our enrollment through open enrollment, pre-K programs, marketing, creating online opportunities. We also spoke to the committee about the impact of the I guess no change in the basic allotment for several years. We did receive a $55 increase in that basic allotment in the last legislative session, but of course the way we responded was going through the actions with our previous budget sprint team to do the tax rate election. We were able to utilize our federal ESSER funds during that time period to help cover the lapse in funding. We also have made several different things. We've done property value audits annually to ensure we're maximizing our state funding and maximizing investment earnings. We also haven't been impacted by inflation, and we gave them certain examples of where we've been hit by inflationary costs over this time period. Biggest cost increases have been in our retirement benefit expenditures for our staff, property insurance, and our security contract. We also have seen an increase in beginning teacher pay of $8,250 since that time frame, so that has added significantly to our costs as well. So we have responded to that by closely monitoring our enrollment to allow for staffing reductions where we can, and also having some staffing studies performed to identify efficiencies. We have been able to eliminate 289 positions through attrition, and also modified our utilization of substitutes and locked in a long-term electricity contract and competitive property and casualty insurance. Finally, we have seen a large growth in special education needs, which has resulted in additional staffing requirements over the years. So although we were able to reduce in certain staffing, we were also having to add to fulfill the needs of our special needs students. So that has seen a large increase in funding, and we did utilize a staffing study this past year to look at our staffing in special ed, which resulted in some restructuring of district level staff to serve our students more efficiently. We did spend some time with the committee explaining our reserve categories. General fund, we have $103 million in reserves. In our capital and contingency fund, we have $39.1 million, and in our debt service fund, which covers the principal and interest on our bonded debt, has a balance of $44.2 million. And you've seen this slide very many times on fund balance. We explained to the budget team the importance of fund balance, that our board policy is maintaining 2 months of operating expenditures. We're currently at 2.7 months there. We explained how our tax dollars work in Clear Creek. We have 60 cents of every tax dollar goes straight into the classroom, with another 5% in counseling and 6 cents in campus leadership. And then another high cost is our facility cost at 8 cents, as well as with transportation and technology, another 4 and 2 cents. Our payroll costs are set at 87% of our budgeted expenditures, so that is important. We wanted to make sure the committee knew where most of their dollars go is towards payroll cost. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we do the budget update, and we provided this to the budget team as well to show where our salaries are at right now. What's interesting is I did go back just a couple years ago to see how we do this survey every year, looking at the same peer districts, and it was interesting to see that just 3 years ago, our picture looked much different when you looked at us versus our peers. We were still at about number 11 with the 0 years of experience, but we were at 10th. And right at the median with our 5 years, and we're ranked number 1 in 15 and 20 years of experience. So it was interesting to see how fast things can change depending on what other districts do every year during their compensation decisions. And just to look at our total experience amongst our teachers, it's pretty well spread out across the board, with about little over 20%, 24% being 0 to 5 years experience, and 22 at 6 to 10, another 18 at 11 to 15, and then so on and so forth. We shared our administrative cost ratio, which is at 4.14%. It's a little less than half of the statewide allowable standard set by TEA. And then we gave them a look really back at where we've been over the past 5 years through COVID. We explained our process for capital and contingency fund, how we have over the years sent money out when we had a surplus at the end of the year in our general fund. We've put that money in capital and contingency, and then in years where we might have had a deficit, such as 21-22, we pulled some funds back from capital and contingency. And 24-25, we pulled $1.4 million back. And then I also explained how this year's budget, we did adopt a $12.5 million budget deficit. We're anticipating it will be half of that, which is good news. And we're continuing to, over the next couple of months, we'll hone in on what that's actually going to be. But over that same time period, that's when we were losing so many students, and so it's really was a keep your head above water thing every year. So I think we fared pretty well there. It's important to look at our forecast assumptions. I won't go through all of these because we're going to go through them again, but we did, these were the same assumptions that I shared with you at the last meeting. And the main thing here is that our assumptions don't have any, at this time, any salary increases in them. And they also have an enrollment decline of about 1,000 students for next year and another 750 in the following year. And that does, you'll see it, with the demographers report, that lines up pretty closely with what they came out with on their estimates. So we did go over the general fund forecast, and which reflected at the time an $18.3 million deficit, and for 2027, with that growing because of the additional loss in students to 24.1. Of course, that is a legislative, the first year of the new biennium, so we'll go through a legislative legislation in that time period, and so it's the projections for 28 aren't as known because we don't know what the state will do with that.
So kind of in conclusion, and that was the information that we shared with our budget sprint team, or budget strategic team, excuse me, and we'll now present the recommendations that were kind of compiled from their information. And you do have a copy of the report, and then I'll go over the highlights. But I'd really like to thank the people, including the trustees in here and those on the committee, that took time from their demanding schedules and jobs to provide insights and recommendations to prioritize certain solutions to the fiscal challenges we're facing as a district. And the report focuses on three key areas as we keep discussing: revenue enhancement, facility and operations efficiencies, and school and staffing optimization. So the key recommendations, and first of all, and just overlooking the position, and thanks to Ms. Benzai and the entire group over the last few years, have raised revenue, cut expenditures, and CCISD does maintain strong academic outcomes, one of the lowest tax rates in the region, financial reserves, and a track record of responsible fiscal management. Enrollment decline and structural funding pressures continue to require us to be proactive. So the recommended path forward, just getting some recommendations just for your consideration. These are things for trustees, and then they gave them to me and staff, and as we continue to look at that and make recommendations, overarching recommendations, and they just gave, they were asked to rank. And so this is kind of a rank order, and then they ranked specific categories. But overarching, you can see to optimize revenue of all available funding sources, CCMR outcomes, identification of economically disadvantaged, attendance increases, things we have been doing but continue to pursue and more aggressively, continue to grow enrollment through additional targeted programs and marketing, execute a phased data-driven district, facility, and school consolidation plan, looking at numbers as we move forward, modify staffing ratios to improve operational efficiency, prepare and educate for a potential voter tax rate election for up to 9 copper pennies. You know, we have the golden pennies, but we have not selected to go out to the community for a request for those copper pennies, and expand partnerships and workforce alignment programs. And those are, you could see kind of that ordering. And then in each of these categories, revenue opportunities, facility operations, and school staffing, we asked them to rank some things, and so they did. And that is just, you know, for your information. But for recommendation, as we've looked through all of the pieces of information that were shared with us, so these are the recommended areas for board consideration. Strategically reduce CCISD payroll costs by 2% through attrition, vacancy management, organizational efficiencies, and process redesign by August 27. That work would use the TASB staffing study and other things that we've continued to do to reduce payroll costs by 2%. Sell or lease underutilized land, looking for land opportunities, and I know that we have recently, we are getting some of that, we've been discussing some of those sales with trustees. Continue to recruit and enroll new students. Setting goals, we're looking at obviously Clear Tech as we move into that. That's an unknown for us, but I think there's definitely potential and opportunity for that. Develop and implement a phased district facility optimization plan that ensures every student has access to world-class education in response to enrollment trends, but we're looking at district facilities across the, in all areas. And then prepare the community for a potential voter-approved tax rate election, and really that recommendation is to look at this information that we're sharing, that we shared with the strategic budget team, and continue to move forward in that, I guess, aligned communication. We've talked about that quite a bit. And then improve legislative priorities to allow local school boards the ability to address local financial needs. And that's something that we'll be coming back to you with. So, like I said, we are just very grateful for the effort and work of these diligent community members. And at this time, that concludes the summary of the information we shared with them, as well as a summary of that report. And so we are now open for questions and comments. That concludes this part of it.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Engel. Thank you, Ms. Benzai. I'll open it up. And trustees, questions and comments.
Yeah, on the operational costs for the schools of choice, what do we pay per student to San Jack for the Clear Horizons program? Because that should be, I think, in that operational cost.
I can't
Because
say-
that's not a
yeah,
cost you can escape.
Right. I can get that. I don't have it
Okay.
offhand, but I can pull that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll pull that. There has been some relief on that with any student that's free or reduced. Now that the state provides that funding for those students, so we've had some reprieve. We also, the Clear Creek Education Foundation will include those. That there's some donation from the Ed Foundation, gratefully so, for that program. So we'll get all of that information together, including those costs.
And then on the staffing and the pay, at what point do we have the toughest time recruiting teachers, like for experience? And at what point do we see the most attrition within those buckets? I think that would be helpful to know to make better decisions about where we need to up it, where we're good, you know. So if HR could kind of figure that out, that would be very helpful.
And we will do that. Dr. Branch will be in tomorrow. He'll be back tomorrow. So
Okay.
we'll get that for you.
And then I too just wanted to thank the members of that budget team. It's telling, though, that they are all friends of public education, and we see what their recommendations were. So I would urge everyone to keep that in mind as we move forward. These are our friends. These are people that support the district, and so it was very telling what those priorities were. So let's keep that in mind when we have these discussions. That these are people that we can count on, and they've given us kind of a clear edict of what they'd like to see done first.
Thanks, Trustee McKay. All right, open it up. Anyone else?
I have a question. What percentage for Clear Tech, or do we have numbers yet for this year for Clear Tech?
Yeah, we do have some numbers right now. Okay, and Dr. Lopez is kind of our administrator working it from the district side, so 78.
We have a unit that we've taken in from the schools that have closed down, but it'll be minimal. We may be able to get it to 85.
Okay. And can you share what what building level are we seeing the most interest? Intermediate is the most interest, yeah.
Okay.
And they are recruiting, as we become aware of some of these online schools that are no longer operational for next year. Thank you for reaching out.
And that was going to be my next question: is what are we doing to promote that, and then what is our ideal capacity for that program?
Yeah. We set a target at 300. Texas Tech really recommended anything over that. You need to look at our staffing. Right now we have a counselor and a registrar, and then in-house, Dr. Lopez has really been doing the work along with our, Ms. Jufrey, and have really worked on that. So we'll continue to be aggressive with that and look at how we can recruit. So word of mouth seems to be one of the ways that works. Is anything you want to add?
Been helping get communication out to the CCISD people that were involved in the online campus that closed down. So we've done some strategic communication out.
And we actually just met with Texas Tech this afternoon, and they've given us their official brand package, which really, really aligns us closely with Texas Tech. So I think once that brand awareness gets out there of the two world-class institutions partnering, we'll have a lot more interest. And based on our initial conversations, we felt like for the first year we don't know what we don't know yet, that we wanted to launch strong and have a great experience for the students. So we felt like this was a good number to have for at least for the first semester, and then we'll reopen enrollment up again for the second semester too.
So when is the cutoff for this year? Has that already happened? Or are we still taking?
It was today.
Oh, it was today.
We actually reopened it when we heard that there was an online school that closed down. We reopened it for another 7 or 8 days and tried to recapture some of those students. And we closed it today because we have to get Texas Tech. We have to sign up for the classes that we need for this year.
And then as far as our staffing goes, I know we said a registrar and counselor. With the number only being at 78, are we still keeping 2 full-time? Are those still 2 full-time positions that are over those 78 versus we were looking at 300?
Our target optimizing was 300, but to get 78, yes. To answer your question, we would keep that staffing. They were very clear that they need that kind of direction, and we want to do this right. We want to make sure we service those students. Also, the counselor we were able to do a 0.5. We kind of did some staffing adjustment so that we were able to reduce a 0.5 from another location and bring that on. So it was really pretty creative with the staffing right now, knowing how we weren't sure about the numbers. We're pretty pleased right now. And we've been waiting for that branding. We've been trying for months, so this is a positive.
Hey, when you're getting those numbers together on that, can we also get the revenue impact on how this may look for our budget, new students? Thanks.
And did I miss these 78? This is new blood into our district. They're not already students in our intermediate that just decided, hey, I'm going to do online instead.
It's a little bit of both. I look at it as retaining students because they would have probably gone elsewhere. That's obviously a family choice. So in some respects, we were able to retain those that we potentially would have lost to a virtual program. So I think it was 40 of existing students, 40%.
And retention is very important. So thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Did you want to go before? Okay, go ahead.
I did have a question. Dr. Engel, and maybe this is also for Ms. Benzai, the items that were provided to the team to put in their preferred ranking or their recommended ranking, did the team members have a sense of what the fiscal impact would be for each of those outside of the general category that they fell under from a new revenue or facility and operations or school and staffing?
So they were given the revenue impact of the VADR. They were given the revenue impact for any facility optimization. Expenditure reductions produce, I'm not sure what that dollar amount we gave them was, but so I think for the large items we did to the extent we could give them amounts.
Okay. I was curious. I just think an entry as an option to consider from a prioritization perspective as part of a budget discussion, thinking about how we navigate the challenging budget scenario that we're in. I guess I make an assumption that I might be more focused on those things that would have a more significant fiscal impact to helping solve our challenge versus those things that wouldn't. And so I just didn't know how that was provided to them.
And when we do, in a little bit, when we do the budget update, we'll see some scenarios of how those would play into the budget
Of what that looks like.
that I think will provide some clarity for you.
Okay. And then did the team get the chance after the information was consolidated to have a follow-up discussion about what collectively everybody submitted and how that played out as far as once it was compiled?
So we had some, I guess, I don't know about wordsmithing, but they did know basically collectively what all the feedback was, and that's where we came up with those individual items, and then they individually did rank them. And so we wanted to do this process, and then we'll circle back with the final report to the committee. But that, and they also had the opportunity to provide additional input if they didn't feel like that everything was considered that they would have in mind. And so we did have all of that, and I believe we shared that all with the board as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the information that we put in a couple of weeks ago, and all of everything from their comments you received. But to answer your question, consolidating all this is really the first time we put this together and shared this. We wanted to share it with y'all.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that and ask, is there time or the opportunity to get the committee this report, the scores, so they can kind of reconsider possibly their recommendations, because this was compiled, right, with all their feedback and everything. But would it be possible to try to get them back together and go back to them and say, hey guys, y'all have given us, this information. Here's, how it was presented to the board. They're one of the charges that said. One of the charges was prioritize and protect resources for student achievement. And I'm looking at the overarching recommendations and wondering, if those that were on the committee kind of kept that charge. We're trying to keep focused on the academic outcomes.
Right.
And being able to look at this and say, we're trying to make a decision. And we're trying to keep that in mind as well.
So we, absolutely, we can bring the team back together. We did make it very, very clear that, because we had one day with them, a day and a half, that this was really a sounding board. Like, this was an advisory role to the superintendent, that they were not making direct recommendations. And that's when Dr. Engel came back around and provided kind of from her lens what the next steps would be. So we can certainly, as Mr. McKay said, these are very friendly people to the district, and but didn't want them to think that what they prioritized was going to be the next steps. It was really just an advisory board to the superintendent. But yes, we can certainly bring them back.
I still think it's important that they're validated, and a lot of them took a day out of work and had to take a vacation day to spend that
Absolutely.
time with us. And
Yeah.
I think it's very important that their work is validated.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why maybe circling back with him and, we've started, at the last meeting having conversations that were already based on what we were expecting to get. And now we've gotten some of it, but circling back around with them, I think would be helpful while we're trying to make the decisions, for all these things. It's very important. Their feedback.
May I make a brief comment?
Go ahead.
If we go back to them and ask them to validate again, are we really validating, or are we asking them, hey, can you maybe change your mind a little here? I don't see the need. They were asked, they were given clear instructions, and they did the task. It seems to me that, now we want a different answer. We got the answer. That's just how it seems to me.
I wasn't necessarily saying a different answer. I think I was just saying that we need, they need to know they were heard, and I know they were heard that day, but now we've had a chance that we've heard the information, and there's going to be some action. And again, they were in an advisory capacity. They're not in where they're making recommendations, but again, they took a day from their normal routine. So.
Well, and I don't think going back and asking them to kind of reevaluate, but I do think it would be helpful to have them all together again, because we were broken out into 3 separate groups. And then the only time we came together was really at the end for kind of a wrap up. But I feel like having that conversation with all of the members of the committee, now that they see kind of where everyone stands with the rankings, and then having those conversations. I also agree with Trustee Sanchez, like having each of those kind of ballpark numbers on there to go with those rankings, to say, here's what this recommendation would put in the bank. I think that would be helpful, because some of them sound like a great idea, but they may not really put a dent in it.
Well, and as you mentioned, these are all pro-public education people that do support the district, and having them on our side with the direction that we go, not knowing whether it's this year or next year, I think it's important to make sure that we get that feedback from them now.
Also, one other thing, I notice on our top moves in each area, there's a glaring omission, and that's continue to grow enrollment through basically open enrollment. And it's not in the next slide where the top moves in each area. And I think that kind of speaks volumes. That should have been in there. That was in part of every discussion that group had, and it's not in that area. It mentions Vader twice, but it doesn't talk. That should be one of those in there in the revenue enhancement or opportunities. So.
And that was under, when we get down to our recommendation, definitely continue to recruit and enroll new students. So that was certainly critical.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
I wrote down, and I'm glad that Trustee Mackay kind of circled back around to that. I wrote down that we have a payroll staff reduction of 2%. Like, that's a goal. I think we need to also name it and give it a target in terms of, trying to increase enrollment or trying to, add to our programs. I know Dr. Lopez said 300 for Clear Tech, but we need to, kind of look at other programs and what that means. And try to come up with a number, a target, basically. Because I agree, if we're going to put a number on staff reduction, we need to put a number on, trying to increase that revenue. Another thing, I like the slide that gives the breakdown on what, a dollar, what that goes toward. Another thing, and I keep hearing this just based on feedback, is the communication piece. Even our friendly, friends of the district don't necessarily know what's going on within the district. And that's a problem. How do we fix that? If they don't know, who knows? And that's an issue that we've had for a while, but now we're trying to do things, and it's hard. It makes it hard to do things when you can't get that cooperation, collaboration. You're trying to prop up the district, but nobody understands that. Nobody realizes that. Nobody realizes where we're at budget-wise. Those are things that have been happening for a while, and so here we are. And Alice, do those numbers, and you're probably going to get it into this for the budget update, but those numbers, when you're talking about the 12 million deficit and hoping that that's going to be half, does that take into any consideration, raises for this year? Because we haven't talked about that yet.
So the $12.5 million and cutting that in half is the 25-26 budget to actual. So that's how we'll end August 31st of 26.
Right.
So that would, it's based on what the board adopted last year. So then when we look at the budget in a little bit for next year, we'll put the numbers for an increase in there, so you'll be able to see, you'll be able to see the impact of that.
Okay, so that'll hit next year.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
Quick thing, I think just to build on Trustee Cunningham, I think there is huge value and opportunity in having people who are supporters of public education and who are friendly to the district. I think it's those people, those voices are the same people who, if equipped with data and information that creates urgency to share more vocally with individuals who otherwise are making assumptions that their children enjoy school, their children enjoy the teaching, experience that they have with their teachers. They feel connected. They feel like they're learning. They're getting, their scores tell us they're learning and instruction is having a positive impact. They recognize that we're focused on character and leadership, and we're providing a world-class education. We are in the news for amazing things that are happening that are student-driven and student-led. And if we cannot rally people around something that is working, that we are not breaking, then I think that's a problem. And so I agree with Trustee McKay. These are people who are friends of, friendly to, supporters of. I think the piece that I think we're missing is we are so proud and so committed to solving the challenge on our own because we recognize that the help and support isn't coming from somewhere else. The very people who would be most invested in wanting to make a difference are going to be the people who've chosen to live in our community. And so when I think about the stories that we tell, that our district is not irresponsible and is not losing, misplacing, spending frivolous dollars on things that aren't important, when we talk about the cost savings that we've made, when we talk about the evaluations that we've done to know that there are opportunities for us to do things different that challenged our history as a district, then I think those are the people who we really need to go to say, we really have been trying all that we can, and we've done just about everything that we can do. And even then, we're still going to talk about more things that we're going to push ourselves to do because we're not going to just settle. But we need to create urgency in our community because otherwise we're losing strong, powerful, educated, influential people who care about this community because they work here, because they live here, because they're multi-generational families. I think that's what Trustee Cunningham was touching on, and I think people would want to be more vocal. I think people would want to be more equipped with the challenge that we're facing, and they should be proud of what they've enabled through partnerships and sponsorships and PTAs and booster clubs and education foundation involvement and grants and supporting all of the nonprofits and wraparound services that we have because we can't do it on our own. We just need to provide them with the information so that when they are in the grocery store and they pass someone who sits on a state committee, they pass the person who they voted for to sit in Austin to represent their views and their opinions, that public education matters just as much as taxes. It matters just as much as opportunities for employment. It matters just as much about the amenities that we have all around us, because without a strong public education system, there is not a charter or a private school in this world that will create a community like Clear Creek ISD.
You know, and you said it very eloquently. Just going back, one of the things I hear all the time, administrative cost. You included that slide because I talk about this all the time. Everybody says, oh, we're top heavy, top heavy, top heavy. That's all I hear, top heavy. And I tell people, no, we're not. We're half of the state average, half. So, you know, I agree with you. If you cannot rally the community, you do not have a community.
Thanks, Trustee Cunningham. Can we try to get a chart of some sort tracking from 2020 to now, enrollment and staffing? Can we try to get something like that maybe to look at? Okay, thank you.
Just one other quick thing, Ms. Benza, I did want to pull on one of your charts. And I apologize, I don't remember which one. It references the basic allotment, and you mentioned it was adjusted $55 this last session after not having been increased, I think, 6 years, about 6 years. And when I look at even in our declining enrollment and the proposed amount that we believe the legislature would need to consider to make an adjustment, taking it from $6,215 to $7,500. Let's just imagine if they did that, just to make up for what has not been done. The total amount, even with our declining enrollment, is just under $49 million. And so I just think it's important. We are looking at potentially negatively impacting things that set us apart, that make our district attractive, that could potentially impact our ability to consider increases to retain the best teachers, the best instruction, that provide the program offerings that we have. And one of the biggest things that has not occurred has just under a $50 million impact. I think it is significant. That's the slide, yes. And so I think that's just something, it's important for us to say it. And if you don't mind just confirming that I'm looking at that correctly, I just want to make sure I don't want to misrepresent what I think the numbers would be, but based on that alone, what that would potentially do for us in the conversation that we're having today.
So I don't have my calculator out, but 1,000 times 38,000 students is 38 million. So one of the things that the state did this past year during the legislative session, though, is they're really getting away from increasing the basic allotment. So they're creating new allotments. And, you know, for example, there's a ABC allotment, and it's, I can't go through all of them in my memory right now, but they're avoiding putting it in the basic allotment and creating new allotments, and kind of trying to steer where you spend the money over here. Here's money for this. And a great example was the salary increases, rather than giving districts the money and letting them have the decision on how to put the money into the salary structure that districts have. They said, no, you give it $5,000 for this experience level and $2,500 here. So there's a little bit more of legislation on how to spend the funds rather than just putting it into the basic allotment.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Are we good? Everybody else? Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Budget update.
Okay, so, and kind of falling on the heels of this, some of this information is somewhat redundant, but it's very important, and we felt like it was wise to go through the overview with the information we shared with the committee, and then Ms. Benzai will give a more detailed budget update for the projections for next year.
Okay, so tonight we will look at, really our objective tonight is to give you information about the remaining timeline on our budget, the budget forecast, which has been updated a little bit. We're providing some compensation and option that we can work from, and we'll be able to look at the impact of that on our forecast and then talk about next steps. So where are we right now? We are, the board approved the health insurance rates, received the strategic budget team report. At the July board meeting, we will be asking for approval on the compensation plan, and you'll be able to get a better look at, really a great look at our demography report at the next board meeting. And then one thing we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation tonight is the schedule of the public hearing that we are kind of one of our urgent issues we need to do now. And then we'll be working on with TEA on setting our compressed tax rate for the year. So in looking at our forecast, I always like to start off with this familiar slide, which is our fund balance. The general fund, we're currently at 2.7 months of operating expenditures. One thing I always like to say our rating agencies for our bonds, when we go out to sell bonds, they don't look at 2 months, although that's our board policy. They want to see 20%. And so they actually combine our capital and contingency funds with our general fund balance, and they're always pleased with that. So looking at currently we're at 102.9 million in our general fund balance. Looking over at our capital and contingency fund, I provided a history of what has happened there. So back in 1920 and 2021, we put in 10.7 million from a general fund surplus into that contingency fund. We have pulled some out. We pulled 9.4 out due to a general fund deficit. And in 22-23, we pulled 5 million out. It wasn't to cover a deficit. It was just to build up the fund balance in the general fund to ensure that we met the board's requirement for 2 months. Because as expenditures grow, that requirement for 2 months grows as well. And then last year in 24-25, we pulled out 1.4 million. Our general fund deficit, we're looking at a 6.7 when we end August 31st. Hoping we have some big adjustments to make, but hoping that I don't believe it will exceed that. I'm hoping I can get it down even a little bit more. So at August 31st of this year, we're anticipating a 33.1 balance in capital and contingency fund. So looking at our budget assumptions before you see the projections here tonight, really the one new item that I added was some additional funding for special education. That there's new legislation. We don't know how they're going to compute that. I'm not sure they know how to compute it yet. They're still working on developing the formulas and looking at once they get student numbers in the fall, how that pans out. But there's only a set amount of money to spread across 1,000 or so school districts. So I basically took a percent of what we currently get and said, okay, it could mean about $1.8 million to us. Another item that I have in there is $5 million from a property value audit. That's one of those one-time items I don't normally include, and if we get it, it's a nice surprise. But I do believe we have a property value audit from 2024 that I believe that will generate additional funding. Spoke about the enrollment declines that we're looking at 1,000 this year and 750 for next year. And then in both years, I have a $5 million savings from staffing reductions. We've already achieved the $5 million for fiscal year 27. So looking at our updated projection, it's for fiscal year 27, an $18.3 million deficit that we would pull the funds from capital and contingency. I always like to say this is a worst case scenario, and we hope we would come in under, but I can't 100% commit to that. But normally we have budget to actual savings, and so this is our outer limit. And then with additional drop of 750 students in 28, you can see how that deficit grows at that point. And all things left, that would require an additional transfer and deplete our capital and contingency fund, and with the need to pull additional 8.7 from our general fund balance. Of course, that is a new legislative year, so we don't know what that will look like in terms of revenue. So I use just the basic current law for fiscal year 28. How does that impact our fund balance? You'll see that by the end, without any, under those assumptions, by fiscal year 28, we will have had a slight decline in our general fund balance, but we would still be at 2.5 months of operating expense, or 21%. So it's starting to get, we want to keep that. That's the concern, and really that's the limit. We don't want to go below 20% there in fund balance. And under that scenario, we will have depleted our capital and contingency fund as well. I wanted to just show the impact of the enrollment loss on our revenue because it just accumulates, and it's really, for districts with declining enrollment, it's very hard to keep up when your revenue is based on enrollment. And so really I took the next 5 years with our demographers' enrollment projections and just used a $9,500 per student revenue. That's more than our basic allotment, but it assumes that students are generating CTE funds or special ed funds, things like that. So you can see how after 26, 27, it would be it's a $10.1 million loss in revenue. But then when you go through the next two years, it's a $17.5 million cumulative loss in revenue, and it just grows with the future enrollment losses. This does not take into consideration, this is just a revenue. Of course, as we're losing these students, we are trying to right size with our staffing, and so it would be offset by that, but it's just does take, it makes budgeting very challenging. So I want to spend a little bit of time on compensation. We have been working with well, before I say that, I'm providing you with a brief history of our compensation and what we've done over the past 4 or 5 years. We have been able to provide anywhere from a 1 to a 3 or 4% increase for our employees. We had the teacher salary schedule up until last year where we were providing the large step increases for certain experience increments. So once a teacher hit 5 or 10 or 15, there was a big adjustment. And so that provided, when we provided these increases, those employees that were reaching that milestone, you can see, would get larger increases. And then last year was a teacher retention allotment that was mandated by the state, which was a $2,500 increase for teachers with 3 to 4 years experience and $5,000 for those with 5 or more years of experience. So we spoke about this earlier, the teacher salary survey, and where we're landing right now. And so we have lost some ground in the past couple of years. We are, when you look at a beginning teacher salary, we're not that far off. We're still at close to 99% of the median, but it does jump in the 5-year gap, 5-year experience range. And then really our experienced teachers over 20, they're still surveying very well against our peers. So we do well with our experienced teachers. But as you saw, I mentioned earlier, we were at number 1 in 15 and 20 years. So we've dropped the past couple years slightly in those areas as well. So we've been working with TASB on our salary and compensation, and they provided us really 3 teacher salary models. In the plan that they have, and it's something that we received feedback on in the past couple of years, was the changing the structure of our steps between experience, because there was, I guess, folks felt like, well, I'm having to wait 4 or 5 years to get this step increase. So we want to repair that, and I don't know if repair is the right word, but adjust that so that we're building those steps back in between the experience level. So that was also the recommendation that TASB had, to go back to more of the classic teacher salary structure. So tonight when I go through the salary model, I'm really I took on Model 2, which is a starting salary for our teachers of $64,500. It's currently $64,000. And TASB also utilizes a model where a midpoint model. So this would take a percent of our market median, which in this case 1% is $725, and applies that to all teachers across the scale. So at your seat, you should have I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this. You should have a 1-pager on the back of your information. And I wanted to explain as you can see, it's got on the left-hand side the years of experience for the teachers and their current salary. And as they move horizontally across the ladder, you'll see that they gain a year of experience. So a teacher that came in last year with no experience now has 1 year of experience. So they would receive under this plan a $725 increase plus a $275 adjustment to put them at 65,000. So they're starting, you'll see now there's a step between the years of experience under this model. And if you go to the very far right of the column, you'll see the various step differentials. So instead of having certain levels being paid the same amount, we're going to start gradually increasing so that we're putting steps in between each experience level. It's something we've talked about the past couple years. Last year was unusual because of the teacher retention allotment, but this is really, when you look at the cost of the increase, it does, because you're making these adjustments, it does increase the cost of what a normal 1% increase would cost, because it does, in some cases you're spending up to $2,500 plus the $725 for those levels of teachers. But this is what it's going to take to revise our salary structure. And I think with our discussions, we feel that we need to do this. Going forward, we feel like it's necessary to do that. So moving along looking at the cost impact, you'll see the cost impact of that is $4.4 million for our teachers. Usually when I look at 1% across the district for all employees, it comes to around $3.5 million. And so that is a large, a larger increase. I think it came to $2.5 million for that, just making those adjustments to clean up the steps. And then looking just straight 1% across the board for all employees. We also are looking at our substitute daily rates and have some survey data on those as well, to bump that daily rate up by $5 a day. We've included that cost there along with the benefit cost. So all of these costs together for a 1% would total close to $7 million under this scenario. So moving along to, it's really a little bit hard to see, I apologize, but I wanted to show you really the unknowns and the levers we have and how different things impact the budget and the projections. Of course, we know we're going into a new year, so we don't know really what our state funding will be for fiscal year 28. That's an unknown. We, one of your levers is compensation options. How much do you want to commit to salary increases? Do you want to, what I'm seeing across the area is that school districts, they're doing anything, I think, from 1% to 3%. See some districts that are not, I think maybe 3 districts that are really have some budget deficit issues that are doing one-time supplements. I've seen one doing a VADER and doing a one-time supplement contingent on a passage of a VADER. So every school district's in a different boat. And so it's really, they're all doing different things. But looking at our scenario with the 1%, that's one of your levers. So the middle box, I'm showing you our current projections without any changes. The only change are those expenditure reductions that we've committed to for next year as well, the $5 million that would go along with right sizing. But looking over in the far right box, you'll see in 27, if you wanted to put in the salary increase of 1%, which would cost $7 million. We have made the $5 million in expenditure reductions for staffing. would leave a $25.3 million deficit, probably a max deficit that we would see for next year. Looking into fiscal year 2028, some of your different levers that you have, really, I raised up our expenditure reductions to 8.3 million. I'm trying to show you that it almost takes a little bit of everything to get a balanced budget. We would need to make expenditure reductions. Doing a Vader for 9 pennies would be 19.1 million additional dollars. And then looking at different options for if we were to optimize facilities utilization, that's, different for every facility or however many facilities. That's put in $8 million of there, and that would get a really a balanced budget. So down at the bottom are also choices that you have is to utilize capital and contingency, continue to utilize capital and contingency, or our fund balance, which I would not recommend going. We want to maintain that 20% at a minimum of fund balance. So really, I was just trying to represent, these are the levers that you have that you can utilize when you're making decisions about salary increases and any other modifications to the budget that need to be made. So moving on to our next steps, we'll discuss compensation a little bit more with any questions you have or recommendations, but we would like to have that approved at the July board meeting. Also, at the July board meeting, one of the on the schedule is for the board to approve or schedule a public hearing to discuss the 26-27 budget and 2026 proposed tax rate. So there are some legal timelines that we are committed to here that we have to take into consideration. And we spoke about it last time, how that public hearing timeline really depends on if the board chooses to call for a tax rate election in November. So if there is a tax rate election in November, we would need to have a public hearing, approve a budget, and adopt a tax rate on August 17th. Normally, we do not adopt a tax rate until September, and it's usually at the last board meeting, but August 17th is the absolute last date to call a tax rate election. The one thing that we have to do is advertise the notice of the public meeting, which has to be published 10 to 30 days before the meeting, and that has to be published in the newspaper. So there are a lot of calculations with our truth and taxation and things that we have to do during this timeline. And so at our July board meeting is when we have to make that determination of when we'll have that public hearing. So in conclusion, I think that's a couple things that we want to get your input and feedback from tonight is on compensation plan, your thoughts on that. And also, at the last meeting, the board approved an efficiency auditor. We want to get your feedback on a timeline for a tax rate election so that we can plan what our next steps are. So with that, I'm open for questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Benzai. All right. I'll open it up. Go ahead.
I'll go first. Okay. I like the new model for the teacher salary. I think that it really sends a strong message to giving a reason to stay, keeping and retaining those teachers. I think in our current model, if you're a year 9 teacher, that's hard because you've gone 4 years without that step. So I really like the new system and the way that is. I think if I'm doing my math right, if we went with Model 2, that would put us around 8 or 9, like ranking wise 8 or 9 for that starting year teacher, which puts us, a little ahead of where we're at now. I think still we are the district that people want to come to, and I hope, we're keeping that, but I think that gives a message that we're not, falling to the bottom in these rankings as far as those getting the new teachers in, because hopefully they'll come here and then they'll stay and they'll eventually be our 20-year teachers. But I definitely like the model, and I like the way it's divided out. On the cost impact, when we talked about the sub, did we still have the super subs, or have we made a decision on what was going on with those?
Dr. Branch isn't here, but
Okay.
they have, we're really restructuring how that works so that our plan is to not have them at the campus level, but more at a set of them at the district level, for when absences rise to a certain level, then they can be sent out to the campuses.
Okay.
I do think and maybe Dr. Engel, you might be able just to confirm this. I had a question about that because I had received a question from a community member, and they were just asking, was our plan to do away with it? And I think the response that I got from Dr. Branch provided some information that just shared that it was an approach that we used when we had increased absences that had really occurred around where we needed the subs because of during the pandemic. I think we had additional numbers and additional requirements, and that over time that has not proven to be the case. And so we're just in a position that the data tells us it's not as much of a requirement today at a campus level. I think that's roughly what he shared as a background.
Correct. And he was doing some data analysis to look at, and I know he's worked with business services to see where those substitutes were. Is there some times when they're not filling a position, and going back and using data to drive that? So we want to make sure that campuses do have substitutes, but the need is not as it was, and it does go back to the pandemic, and we had extensive need, and that was something that the board approved at that point, and so it looks like we may need to modify that to meet the needs of the campuses, as well as looking at finances.
And we also, when we were looking at that, felt like our sub rates our expenditures and subs have risen, and that did contribute to it, but we also felt like the increase for the daily rate was important too for all subs, just to be able to be competitive and make sure that we're not losing substitutes to surrounding districts.
Okay. And one more question, as if we were to look at like Model 2 is kind of the one I was going on, because that's the paper that you printed out. But so it says that we're ensuring that the salaries are at least equal to, with the increase in the insurance, with this increase, would they still be the same, or would we need to increase it more to cover the insurance difference?
It would depend on what tier and plan that the employee was on, but we talked about employee only, which is where most of them fall. It's about $721 a year increase in premiums, and so this would be $725. So at least on the teacher level, a 1% would, if they're only receiving $725, it would, and they had employee only coverage, it would basically cover the cost of their health insurance.
So it would just be if they had their family, then they still potentially would have a reduction in
Yes.
salary. If we went with Model 3, would that be enough to cover the difference, or you still would have some teachers that would be making less?
Not many, because
Okay.
not many have family coverage, but that increase was pretty
Just get rid of money.
significant for family coverage. So $3,000 a year increase for family coverage.
Okay.
I don't know that there's only a few
But it's a
scenarios
small
on
amount
here
of
that
employees that would fall into that category.
there's only in that particular category there's 21 employees. There's 33,
Okay.
so 33 on another plan, 60 on another plan, so a little over 100 employees.
100.
with
Okay, so
family
still with
coverage.
Model 2, majority of employees would not see a decrease in salary even with the insurance increase,
Right, if
Right.
they have employee-only coverage.
if they have employees. Okay.
Or, yes,
And those are teachers.
those are teachers.
Thank you, Trustee Cheka. Anyone else? Go ahead.
The 1% takes care of our people so they can continue the purpose of our district, and that's to provide a world-class, and that's to provide the promise of a world-class education. So people, purpose, and promise.
Thank you, Trustee Cunningham. Anyone else? I wanted to ask, when you're looking and forecasting the budgets, budget assumption that included special education funding, you said that there's some new legislation. Can you get us numbers on how that aligns with some of our staffing needs? Because I know that's an area that we've had a lot of increase as well. And I think, put some things into perspective as well. And then again, just forward thinking into this legislative year and conversations that may need to be had, but it would be helpful to see how that, how much that does help. Yeah, right. So
Yes, and we spend much more in special education costs than we receive from the state, but
Yeah.
I have that information, so I'll send it out in
Yeah, that would be
the
helpful.
weekly memo.
Thank you. The other thing was the 2027 projection. Is that, I would say, like a do-nothing forecast? Like, if we're not right-sizing, if we're not reducing staffing, if we're not closing, is that if we just status quo and have enrollment loss, how it is forecasted?
Right, so in the previous slide, which I'm not sure if I can get them to bring it up, but if you, on slides, it was 16, if you can get to that one, we have already reduced $5 million in staffing this year, so adding in a $7 million without a Vader or any other expenditure changes, and that would be a $25.3 million deficit remaining with that.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at.
Actually, I think it was at the very end, which is hard to read.
Yeah, I know that one had the $5 million for
Yes.
expenditure reductions. The impact of enrollment loss on revenue, and then the actual lost revenue. So I didn't know if
All
that
of
was
that's included. The
okay.
enrollment loss is all in
It
there.
is included in that. Okay. The last thing I was going to ask about, well, I think that's the last thing. Yeah. The last thing I was going to ask about is additional revenue. I know Vader's been mentioned, and it's also calculated in some of those future forecasts. Have we looked into, it's called the Freeport inventory exemption? Have we looked into that it's a tax, it helps our local businesses out with their tax burden, but then it could help us out because I don't think it counts into our M&O. So is that where?
So the foreign trade zones, is that what you're?
Well, I know
referring
it's
to?
called the Freeport inventory exemption. So I
So
don't know
we,
if that's the same thing.
we did in December approve a foreign trade zone agreement with an operator that was utilizing some warehouse space in Pasadena, which was in Clear Creek ISD confines. So they approached us about doing this, and it's if they're operating within a foreign trade zone, then the personal property tax on the goods that flow through that zone are property tax free, but the reason that we signed the agreement with them was because they wanted us to give them a non-opposition letter, which they needed to create that within the foreign trade zone. So we did proceed with that. I don't know what that, and they will pay us in lieu of the taxes on
Right.
the inventory. And so this is the only one we have. This is the only one that we've been approached, and it took probably a couple years to get that going. I don't know what kind of, how much inventory is going to flow through that, and that, so we wouldn't bill for that until next year. So I'm not sure what kind of revenue it would raise, but they approached us about doing that.
And again, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but based on some of my research, and that's why I ask if you can possibly dive deeper into it, because with Spaceport, as an example, and then other businesses that pay a heavy tax burden into CCISD, it could give them some tax benefit and then help us out with our revenue. And it's something that's outside of Evader. It's something that doesn't impact our taxpayers, and could be a long-range benefit, as well as contributions to the Ed Foundation that could go to funding some major programs as well. So if we could maybe look into that a little bit.
Sure.
More. So, I think that was it for me. Any other trustee questions? No? All right. Okay, district goals.
Okay, and our final point tonight, and you'll see some of these ideas that we've discussed are overlapping in our goals, obviously. I really want to thank Cabinet and other district leaders for collaborating over the past few months to develop a draft of the 26-27 district goals, which are a continuation of our Vision 2030 strategic plan. Academic achievement, beyond boundaries, and culture of excellence. As we continue to coalesce and align around these three goals, we will share each goal and solicit feedback, and then the goals will be on the July board agenda for approval. So this is your opportunity to provide any information. So we'll just go through those, and different cabinet members are going to touch on each one of those goals. We start with academic achievement, and I think that's Dr. Stallings.
Thank you, Dr. Engel. Our first strategy under the academic achievement goal is to continue to strengthen and align our instructional systems to improve student academic growth by 2% to get us that A, 90 or higher. And to do that, we're going to develop and implement campus-specific improvement plans based on performance data to improve student growth. We're going to implement the K-12 Bluebonnet math curriculum with fidelity across all campuses as measured through walkthrough data and curriculum alignment indicators. We're going to ensure all of our campuses continue to implement aligned PLC practices, have regularly scheduled PLCs, unit internalization, and data cycles. And that's going to be measured by our strategic implementation guide. And that's just basically a guide that helps us rate our PLC process. In addition, we're going to monitor our multi-tiered system of supports for fidelity, which is Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports across all campuses as measured by intervention tracking systems and campus data reviews. And finally, we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of our new instructional model and professional learning systems using a defined cadence of accountability.
And I will promise I won't interrupt, but I do want to just ask our elementary executive directors to share. We have started this today, their first day back, and so we had all the elementary principals. Do you want to just give us an executive overview?
Yes, we had opportunity to kind of highlight some of our success schools that started this working together, common planning and learning. And so we had a chance to bring the coordinators together and look closely at that alignment, just to empower them to, as they're looking through their performance data, really targeting that success to elevate it, also coming alongside where they can close that gap, and really maximizing this system across all 27 elementary schools. Teachers at the schools that were involved in this all last year, they worked really hard, and they did a great job at really thinking through all of the possibilities when planning together. And what we know about teacher efficacy is that when they have clarity about what to teach and the opportunities to collaborate with the best of the best, and what do you know and what do I know, and we pull it together, they get excited about it. So today it was a lot of conversations around this new system, how Ms. Jufrey and I will come alongside the CNI team to ensure that they feel supported. It's a big shift because we're definitely wanting to ensure that everyone has a seat at the table and they're hearing the same message, but we also want them to be recognized for that individual success. And so we're looking closely at those walkthroughs and getting those teachers the feedback they deserve so they can also strengthen their own practices.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Any questions?
All right, strategy number 2 there for academic achievement: expand innovative student learning pathways and strengthen college and career military readiness outcomes. And so we'll do that by beginning a comprehensive review of our CTE programs as well as our advanced academics. We want to ensure that as we go into the future, our students are prepared for that future. And so that'll include, really reviewing our participation as well as our performance up to this point, and then creating long-range plans, again, to ensure that our students are prepared for what is out there after high school. As we've spoken many times, we're going to be expanding our stream of innovation at our intermediate schools this upcoming year, as well as planning for 2 additional schools. Increasing that CCMR in attainment. I want to take a moment just to brag on the high schools and the work that they have done over the past few years, increasing that. And so we are going to certainly stretch them this upcoming year with this factor of 5% growth in both the TSI and the non-TSI pathways. We know that they have the ability to do that, and so we're going to challenge them with that piece as we move forward. Dr. Lopez has already started that 4th bullet there, creating a CCMR 2031 accountability plan. That seems like a long way off, but the 2031 accountability is based on the class of 2030, which is actually our incoming freshmen. So we want to make sure that our students that are going into high school have a plan moving forward for the next 4 years so that we are ready for that 2030 graduation and ultimately 2031 accountability. Then the final bullet there is expand the ClearTech virtual program, which much has been said tonight. Enrollment for our 3rd through 10th grade students with growth targets monitored.
And then going into our B, Beyond Boundaries, Strategy 1, implement a district facility optimization plan that ensures every student has access to world-class education in response to enrollment trends. This ties very closely to what you heard earlier and tied to recommendations from the committee. First one being complete facility utilization and enrollment analysis, develop transparent facility consolidation criteria and decision rubric, launch community engagement process. I want to pause there because I heard some of that about being very intentional about communicating with the community. So this is a very important part here to kind of launch that community engagement process. Develop a transition plan, facility optimization with a focus on maximizing student opportunities, and then expand marketing and open enrollment efforts to mitigate anticipated enrollment decline by recruiting or retaining 400 students. Again, this ties directly to that metric of having growth being measured by a certain number of students we want to gain through our recruitment opportunities here.
This also echoes a lot of what our trustees shared during our strategic budget team discussion, but to develop to strengthen public understanding of school finance and support for future funding solutions by developing a comprehensive public education campaign to explain school finance challenges, cost-saving efforts, and the district's commitment to a world-class education, to create a coalition of support involving business leaders, municipal leaders, PTA, all of those people that are fans of CCISD, to bring them together to harness their support and understanding of our challenges. Adopt legislative priorities that advocate for funding systems, providing greater local flexibility and student investment, and to prepare the community for a potential voter-approved tax rate election.
Strategy 3 is to create a sustainable financial model that reduces cost, improves efficiency, and allows employees to focus on high-value work. So those goals would be to align staffing allocations with enrollment trends, programs, and service needs. So we will evaluate our staffing annually using enrollment projections and class sizes, program participation, and student needs to preserve instructional quality and ensure really positions are aligned with actual demand. Goal number 2, reduce payroll expenditures by 2% through attrition, vacancy management, organizational efficiencies, and process redesign. And then finally, goal 3, which is to implement artificial intelligence and automation to streamline administrative operations. So we will identify opportunities to use artificial intelligence and automation for routine communications, reporting, document creation, scheduling, and other business functions.
Okay, and then goal 3, culture of excellence. And Dr. Branch is not here, so I'm going to read that first strategy: improve employee engagement, trust, communication, and retention scores on the district's annual survey by at least 2 points through an environment where employees can do their best work. And implement the culture of excellence matrix to ensure appropriate support and resources are available to employees. That's just a way for us to look at different aspects of a campus and different departments and provide supports needed. Implement a district-wide communication and decision framework that ensures employees understand what decisions are made, why they matter, and how they align with district priorities. Systematize and improve the overall onboarding experience for new employees and new leaders to clearly communicate the district's mission, and develop systems for the teacher incentive allotment implementation for the intermediate schools in 26-27 with continued phase implementation for K-12.
Strategy 2 is to improve district-wide systems to ensure a safe environment through a centralized safety vulnerability prevention system. The goal will be to coordinate the successful completion of the Texas Education Agency's district vulnerability assessment and develop, implement, and monitor corrective actions to resolve identified deficiencies.
And strategy 3, to enhance the family experience through two-way engagement, technology, and streamlining systems and processes. We will enhance the student, staff, and employee experience through the use of new communication tools, create additional opportunities for new and current families to learn about CCISD's world-class opportunities that are inclusive of transitions through important milestones, and increase business partnerships through the online student mentor match program.
Okay, yeah, and that concludes our recommended action steps under each strategy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. And I'll open it up to trustees, comments, feedback, questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, on goal B, beyond boundaries, strategy 1, the last bullet point, shouldn't that say expand marketing and open enrollment efforts to mitigate anticipated enrollment decline by recruiting 400 students? There's no way to know if you retained a student through those efforts. So it should just be recruiting 400 new students.
Noted. We'll make sure to look at that to address that.
Saw it somewhere else in one of the reports, and it was worded that way, so maybe it's just didn't transfer over.
All right, thank you. All right, any other feedback? Go ahead.
Also on Beyond Boundaries on Strategy 2, the first bullet, as we were talking earlier, so thank you for this, because I do think it really ties to what we were talking about earlier in leveraging our community support. If there is a way for us to incorporate emphasizing the important role our community plays, especially going into a legislative session. And then as I looked at the second to last bullet in Strategy 2, it states adopting legislative priorities. It says winter 2026, and I don't know if I was just looking at that wrong, but in advance of January. So I just wonder if, in order to tie timing of when advocacy and early conversations happen to potentially adjust how committees and how staffers speak about the challenges that we're facing, if that could be brought up to this fall, because I think so much of that happens even before the session starts. I think if we wait past experience, unless it's somebody's priority before ours, the chance that we'll get traction is probably pretty low. So I just would ask about that. And then the last bullet, and I know we're still exploring options and solutions and timing. I wonder if we can just put, for now, either a question mark or something about the timing of the voter-approved tax rate election, because we may be preparing sooner than later, or we may decide it may be that it takes 2 times, depending on the conversations that happen with our community.
Yeah, and that was really, I mean, like I said, this is a draft, and so we'll definitely change on the legislative, and that it's definitely open to trustee discussion. So we'll take the date off for now, and because we know that all that aligns with this communication, so we will keep that open. And I know that goes back also to what Ms. Benzai was talking about with determining whether, what that tax rate is we're going to publish. And so all of that is aligned.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Trustee Larson.
Yeah, so I'm looking, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between the budget presentation and Goal B Strategy 2 here, and I'm just trying to put the timeline together in my head. So my understanding is we have got, and just trying to map this out, for fiscal 27, we're looking at the salary increase, and we have to make a decision on that this year. Okay. Just looking at the fiscal 28 stuff, that shows, a potential Vader that year. But did I not hear that we need to make a decision if we're going to move forward early on that by the August 19th of this year? So, and I'm looking at the dates there of fall 2026 and August 2027. I know Trustee Sanchez talked about that, but I think where I'm going with all of this is if you look at under Strategy 2, that very first bullet there about the public education campaign, that is going in one direction. That is going from the school district to the community. And I think given that we have all these decisions coming up, and some of these decisions we're going to have to make short term, and some of these decisions we may make one way this year, and we may have to revisit them again next year. I think we're missing a step here. I think we also need to be collecting feedback from the community. I mean, the education is mandatory. I agree with you there. The public needs to see what we're seeing right here, but we also need feedback from the public, because we can put representative dollar figures on what this means to the public. And I think if we could do that and get feedback from them, I think it would help us with some of these difficult decisions that we're faced with both this year and at the same time next year.
Would that coincide with like a community survey?
I was just, going to get that information from Ms. Polson, right?
I think what we're hearing is really that community capacity building of bringing a group of people together to sort of go through the journey with us, wherever that takes us. More of an expansive look than just than the strategic budget team. So absolutely, we should incorporate community feedback in all areas. And so, but it needs to be more than just a QR code and submit. So it really needs to have those meaningful conversations. But so I can certainly add that to the end of that, develop a comprehensive public education campaign explaining school finance challenges, district's commitment to world-class education, and receive community feedback and recommendations. Sure.
And following up on that too, we have done surveys, community surveys, and I think, was that something that you were thinking about? Yeah. Right.
Thanks, Trustee Larson. I'll mention this because I know one of the items on here, the word innovation, and anytime I see the word innovation, I get excited. And then I actually see our new executive director for the Education Foundation, Glencore Rogers, here. So congratulations. So it's an opportunity, I think, for these collaborations to take place. It's a great schedule. Yes, I agree with some of the trustees' timelines that will need some adjusting and some things will need to be reevaluated. Trustee Sanchez, the kind of timeline for the coalition, I think it's typically October when we start having those conversations. So that would be fall rather than winter, of course. And then, of course, if a Vader or anything like that takes place, getting that coalition together, timeliness as well. But I see world-class education through this document quite a bit, and it stays at the forefront of all of our minds and timeline. And whether it's the community collaboration or the academic outcomes that we are promoting in this district, I think keeping this in mind is very helpful, and we appreciate it. So thank you. With that, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that to speak to Trustee Sanchez's point, we probably want to align our timeline with that of BAHEP, for example, so that if they're having discussions early on, they have connections. If ours could mirror that, I think we'd be in a good spot. And I remember we were at the last meeting and they kind of lined that out, and it's sooner rather than later. So
right, like this
definitely
summer.
Need to step that up.
Agree.
And I think we've talked recently about it may look a little different than it has in the past too. But we'll be collaborating, with BAHEP and the chambers as well, and so getting that community support. With that, any other feedback, questions, comments? Dr. Engel, anything else?
Yeah, so what we'll do, we'll incorporate those changes that we've heard, and we'll get that information back out to you, and then this will come back to the board for approval in July. What we are going to do, since we have majority, overarching support, it sounds like we will tomorrow morning. We are meeting with all of our leaders across the district, and so we would like to give them an overarching ABC. This is our direction, keeping that aligned, keeping that focused, letting them know that we shared that with y'all tonight, and they kind of started in that. We know world-class education and the academic growth and achievement is number one priority. And so we've begun the work, and we'll continue that, but we'll share this high level with them tomorrow, and then we'll focus in on it once we get everything approved. Thank you.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Quick thing, Dr. Engel, I know earlier there was I think Trustee Mackay had asked about Clear Tech, or maybe it was Trustee Cunningham, about the total number that we would hope to be able to expand that program to. Like, what is the number? And if it's 300, is that a number we could include here simply because it will help as people think about when we say we feel like we're making progress, we feel like we are expanding, could look different depending on what the numbers are and who's looking at it. But I think truly if we believe that 300 is ultimately the goal, how we're working towards that over time, maybe informed based on this first year, that would just help as we keep an eye on it. Just like we look at attendance and setting a percentage, not saying we want better attendance, but we want 95% or we want greater than that. And that allows people to rally around it. And so how we talk about it, who we talk to about it, how much energy we put behind it, simply because it exists doesn't satisfy our goal. We ultimately want it to be excellent, and we want it to grow and we want it to reach students that we wouldn't have had as our enrollment, and then also retain students that may otherwise choose to leave because they're looking for a virtual option. I think there are a number of items that are listed that do include either a percentage or a number, or we know specifically what the intent is, but where that's possible, I just think it helps us keep an eye on that.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that. We haven't started yet, we were a little bit unsure. We knew that 300 was probably needing another staff member. So we knew that 300 and below. So we will definitely, now probably what you're looking at then is re-enrollment in the second semester, because it's an enrollment by semester so that students get credit for it. But we will aggressively, especially now that we get the marketing tools, and we'll continue to aggressively, a big target for us.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it should be part of that 400 that we're trying to grow. And we've got pre-K now, we've got ClearTech, we've got open enrollment, and so each one of those numbers on a consistent basis would be nice to have. That way we see what's working, we know where to put our resources, and if something's not working, we can figure out maybe why it's not working.
And we can put that in the packet. I know we were doing that on almost like a weekly basis for a while with the ClearTech, so thank you.
And then I would just say thank you for pulling this together. I know over the years what these look like each year has really evolved, and I think we've evolved from having more pictures than words, and more examples and stories than potentially actual metrics or goals. I think these things definitely show alignment to the role that our campuses play, that our leaders and teachers play, staff members, and I just appreciate that. So thank you all for spending the time to pull these things together that just continue to evolve and move us forward. So thank you for that.
All right. No other feedback and no other information? All right, so at 7:16, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.